Welcome back to another sewing tutorial where I share what I've learned working as a professional seamstress. If you're new here, hi, I'm Leah. I studied fashion design, pattern making and worked as a professional seamstress for 3 years. And now I'm going to show you how you can make a skirt for yourself. This project is especially beginner friendly and I would totally recommend doing this project as a first clothing project. I have printed the pattern already, and if you are printing it, just make sure you check the box print 100%. The sizes are down here, and with the size chart you can find your perfect fit. Here is also a box to check to make sure that the sizing will be right. When you print 100%, this should be exactly 5 to 5 centimeters or 2 by 2 inches. Let's check. Perfect. There are a few ways you can cut the pattern, but I'm choosing the quick way today. However, I would not recommend rushing a sewing project, but you can definitely do this like that. I am just matching up the crosses, and for that I'm just on one side cutting back the corners. What you can also do is cut back to the dash line on one side, so you don't have too much paper on top of each other. And then you can just tape it together. And when you finish taping, you can cut it out. When preparing your fabric, you can actually, with fabric that is woven in a straight manner, you can just pull one of the threads, and when you can pull it all the way across, you know you have a straight edge. If it's not too much, you can just leave the fuss, or you can also cut it off and then just pin it along each other. And you really do want a straight edge so that after washing again and wearing it, your dress, the side seam of your dress or the side seam of your skirt won't move towards the front. I'm sure you had a piece of clothing before, the ones you've bought even, mostly the ones you've bought, where the side seam would just wander towards the front and the other one towards the back, and that you really want to avoid, and for that you are pinning the pattern with a straight edge. Usually also you always fold the fabric in half, so you have a fold on one side and an open edge on the other side. But you can also fold from both sides towards the middle if you have a lot of pattern pieces on fold. And also pinning the other side, so I'm sure I have 2 straight sides. And that's just to ensure that the thread running will be very straight. Now, as I have pinned all the edges, I can take my pattern. The patterns that are to be cut on fold are always marked with on fold here. So that means the fabric is folded and you will not cut there. For this pattern, it's these 2 pieces, and you can just pin it along the edge. The thread running is also always marked with an arrow, and that needs to be straight with the fabric. Very important for the side seams to stay straight. Now, with most, if not all, skirt patterns, you should have 2 pieces of facing, and they always need to be on fold, at least when the skirt is symmetrical. So for the back, this is on fold, and for the front of this piece, it's not on fold because the skirt is asymmetrical. But here you have the thread running, just make sure that runs along the threads of the fabric. And of course this piece put on along the edge where you folded the fabric. As I always say, pin your pattern a lot because you don't want to move it, and especially if you're cutting with scissors, you want to pin even more because you'll be lifting the fabric to cut, which makes the pattern move slightly. And you really do want a clean and straight edge, because otherwise your piece will not be straight. The seam allowance is already in the piece, so also for that you don't have any seam allowance and you're just measuring from the edge, so therefore you really do want a straight edge for your skirt, or generally any clothing piece. When you have pinned everything, you can cut it out. Now always remember, when cutting darts, you're not going to cut down here, and you rather actually make a little triangle like this, so that it will lie flat along the edge of your pattern. Never ever cut down here, really important. And also you can just follow along the edge of the pattern, because 1 centimeter seam allowance is already in there. If you do want to do French seams, you would have to add 1 centimeter to the side, which can easily be done with a geo triangle like this. We would always cut like that in the atelier. But for home, you can just cut along the edge here and nothing can go wrong. When you have all your pieces, the back piece unfold, the front piece twice, 4 times the strap, and both of the facings, you can mark the darts. You can either use chalk, a tracing wheel and tracing paper, or you could also use a coloring pencil if you don't have any of these options. Just choose a light pastel color and tip it in some water, and then you can just mark super easily and that will wash out. Always mark your dots on the wrong side of the fabric and on both sides. Here you also have 2 little markings for the straps that you will also need to remember. You can either mark it now or just measure it later. When you have facing, you preferably want to use some iron-on fabric. I'm using cotton iron-on fabric, and just don't forget to make sure that the glue dots are facing the bad side of the fabric, so that when you iron it on, it's on the bad side. And if the sides are the same, just make sure for the front piece you do once use it like that, because you'll have to. I'm also quickly marking the side seam for my piece with a cross, so I can remember which side of the facing. If you're cutting it with scissors, just better pin it so it doesn't move. It depends what kind of iron-on fabric you have, but generally it does have a thread running, so remember to check that as well when cutting. When you have all the pieces ready, you can iron on the iron-on fabric to the facing. I'm always doing that from both sides. So initially just ironing it on and then really pressing it on again. This you'll really want to keep in place. To prepare the straps for the skirt, I'm just ironing them in half. And then I'm sewing down like this, and then you can cut the seam allowance back so you can still turn them. And then I'm gonna do a zigzag stitch over the edge just to be sure it will hold in the wash. When you have thicker fabric, just leave both sides open and use a safety pin to push it through. To finish the edges, I'm just cutting it back straight, and then I'm choosing a zigzag stitch, not super wide, about 1.5, and stitch length about 1, and I'll just go across the edge. I did go a little bit back and forth, and it has a nice finish. Now I can pin the facing, and for that I'm taking the back piece and the two other pieces I have marked. So one times the side seam here and here, which is going just here. This I'm pinning, and the other, here's my cross, I'm pinning here, like that. Then taking the skirt pieces, you can remove the pattern. Now you've marked your darts, and you can pin your darts from the left side of your fabric. For pinning darts, I'm always starting at the tip here with the head on this side and the sharp side there, like this. This I'll do for all the darts. As all my darts are pinned now, I can take the back piece with the two darts and turn the nice side upwards so the darts look finished on the side. Well, not really, we have to sew them first. But then I'll take the front piece with the dart down, so the pin dart towards me, so I have the nice sides facing each other. The longer side is the middle, and then I can just pin the side seam together. Taking the other side and also pinning the side seam here. Now when we've took off the pattern, we have marked 1 centimeter down here from the edge, which was marked on the pattern, and that's actually where I'm precisely going to place the strap. Now on this side, at the edge of the skirt here, I'm placing it onto the right side of the fabric here. And the second strap just here. Now I am going to the side where the straps lie, and here I'm opening up the side seam and putting in the strap exactly that 1 centimeter down, and it really needs the 1 centimeter seam allowance above, so don't go too close, like this. And the strap goes in between, and here you can pin like that. Then just quickly check to make sure you have it precisely right. You can measure the distance from your strap. So I just measured below the strap, so my second strap goes here. Just pushing it in like this. And pinning like that. So the straps are now sandwiched on this side of the seam, which is the side seam, and here they are at the front piece. Now I am sewing the darts, and I'm starting at the waist and I'm going towards the tip. This way I can go much closer and the darts will be much nicer. Here I'm using stitch length 2.5. At the start I'm doing a few back stitches and I'm going directly towards the edge. It's only holding on by a thread. And now you can either come off and then knot your thread, or you can do a few back stitches, but just very careful, right on top of your other stitches. Go super slow, maybe by hand even, and just do a few back stitches. And it should look like this. Like that, I'm now doing all the darts. When the darts are done, I'm also sewing together the side seams with 1 centimeter seam allowance. Generally you have like a little line where you can just follow. And at the start and at the end I'll do a few back and forth stitches. Here I'm also just quickly sewing on the straps, doing a few back and forth stitches. And the other side seam where I've sandwiched the straps, it doesn't matter if you have sewn this already, just one needs to be with the straps. I'm also taking the facing and sewing both side seams together with 1 centimeter seam allowance, stitch length 2.5, and I am also doing a few back and forth stitches at the beginning and at the end. Now I have overlocked the side seam, and I'll just do the second one that I'm doing from the back. The back piece is the one with the 2 darts. And here I'm just always checking that I have all the fabric to the side, and I'm also paying attention that everything lies nice and flat. And if you don't have an overlocker, you can just use a zigzag stitch across the edge. This is just to prevent fraying when washing. For the facing, I also have overlocked both side seams. Taking the facing, I am now ironing the side seam towards the back. This I always do from both sides, so I'm sure that everything's nice and flat. Always pulling it apart like this. Then taking the skirt in the back, I am ironing the darts towards the middle, and the side seam I'm ironing towards the front. With the dart at the front, I'm ironing it towards the front. Same for the other dart, I'm ironing that towards the front. And then I'll turn it over and iron everything a second time from the other side, so that I'm sure that everything lies perfectly nice and flat. Then you can overlock the bottom of your facing. Just make sure the seam allowance lies into the direction you want. And it should look like that. Now taking the skirt, you can place it as you would on your body. Like this, the nice side outwards, and then you can take the facing and pin the facing along the waist seam. Just matching up the side seam here, and then a pin the whole way. And here on the side as well. Same with the back, just matching up the seam, and then I'll pin all around the waist, matching up the middle and the back. Since here it's not that much of a rounding, the tip of the dart isn't as needed here because it's not as much of a rounding as in other places and other patterns. So you can cut it back a tiny little bit if it is too high, but you can also later do it with the overlocker just before you do your zigzag stitch, in case you are doing a zigzag stitch. Also cutting back the threads of the overlocker, I just usually do with the overlocker. If not, I'll just make a knot. And if you do your zigzag stitch, you can also do a few back and forth stitches at the start and at the end. But now I just finished pinning. Now I am starting with 1 centimeter seam allowance up here, and then I put my needle down and turn it and follow this edge along until the other side, where I just stop here. Also at the start and at the end I do a few back and forth stitches. Stitch length is 2.5 and 1 centimeter seam allowance. Here, when I come to the side seams, I'm just carefully checking that the seams lie into the right direction, the direction I want, and I have ironed them into. In the corners here, I'll cut back the edge a little bit, like that, on both sides. Now at my overlocker from the front, I go down to the bottom seam and overlock from there. And I do the waist seam. If you don't have an overlocker, just do a zigzag stitch. This is prevent fraying, so it doesn't really matter. It's on the inside, but yeah. Okay, careful with the strap. Just check that it lies nice and flat into the right direction. And I also do the bottom seam. I am now ironing the facing upwards, and this I'll just do all around. Choosing a longer stitch, about 3.5. I am starting to sew about here from the edge, but I also on the side of the facing with the seam allowance towards the facing as well, and I'll just sew it down from this side. I'll just follow the edge like that, and I'll always pull a little bit to make sure that the fabric is nice and hot. Here as well, I'll stop a little before the edge because the edge is too tight to go around. Now pulling it out at the edge here with the strap, I can just iron it down like this. Here at the edge, I'm ironing in 1 centimeter, like this. And on the other side as well. Ironing in 1 centimeter on both sides. You can check on the length you want and then iron up your seam allowance as much as you want, like this, or just 1 centimeter, or you can decide how much you want. To finish the facing, just make sure everything lies naturally nice and flat, and then you can pin the seam here. And now you can do a few stitches with your sewing machine along here, but careful that you're not cutting anything else. Just do here in the edge a few stitches. Here I'm using a shorter stitch length, about 2.5. and on the other side as well. Then taking the side at the front with the straps, you can now follow the edge about foot wide with a longer stitch, and that's for me 3.5, and that's about 7 millimeters. Because you iron back 1 centimeter, that will be nicely flat and along the edge of the seam allowance. And the same for the other side, just sewing it on foot wide with the longer stitch. Now taking the thread double with the loop down here, I'm taking a needle and my button, placing the skirt flat like this, matching up the waist. I can now put the button here into the corner and sew it on. For that, I'm going through the loop and I'm just sewing it on in the edge here. Placing it super flat and matching it up, and now know where the other button needs to go. So I'm just placing it like this and checking. When you've tried your skirt on and decided on the length and ironed up your seam allowance at the bottom, you can sew it down again with a longer stitch.